I've got responsibility as the director of the DT Hub for being able to manage the operational team and ultimately to be a steward for the broader community and help to deliver what the community wants us to deliver. And today I'm delighted to be joined by two very substantial technology and digital solutions companies and a couple of prestigious UK institutions to talk about the barriers that we need to break through to unleash the potential of digital twins. And an important part of the Hub's work is to identify ways that we can accelerate activity and deliver the impact and the promise sooner. So understanding those barriers is critical, and what we're going to do about it is what we're discussing today. So I'm going to now pass across to each of the panelists to introduce themselves briefly before I'll start asking them some difficult questions. David.
Hello everyone, I'm David Wagg from the Alan Turing Institute, and I'm also a Professor of Mechanical Engineering at University of Sheffield.
I'm Keith Deere. I'm Managing Director of Fujitsu's Centre for Cognitive and Advanced Technologies, where we're interested in digital twins, but anything that draws insight and foresight from data, fundamentally cognitive technologies.
Hello everybody, I'm Miranda Sharp, and I'm CEO and founder of Metis Digital, and also for the purposes of this discussion, an associate at the Open Data Institute.
And hi everyone, my name is Kjell Eriksson. I lead a global initiative in DNV on quality assuring digital twins, AI, and other digital assets.
Thank you all. Simon had just mentioned an exciting project that the Alan Turing Institute is and David's name was on screen. So I'm intrigued to first of all ask him a little bit more about that and the work that the Alan Turing Institute is doing. But I think what I'd be keen to understand is what you're doing to stimulate the development of research and the communities that are going to underpin the innovation and ensure that the investments we're making into the space are made wisely. David.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the plug earlier. I thought I was going to have to do that myself, but it's been done very, very well in advance. So yeah, I think the way that the digital twin research landscape has evolved is that there's been a lot of really, really good work being done in domain sectors and industry and practitioner-led areas, and I think, to be honest, the academic efforts have somewhat lagged behind that. And I'm hoping that the UKRI Digital Twinning Network Plus, which has just been announced, is going to be a mechanism by which we can try and promote more academic insights and more academic work that helps to underpin all of the other efforts that are going on in industry and the wider community. I should also mention, I got my name on the slide out there, but actually there's a huge level of support in putting together a UK-wide consortium. Over 150 organisations signed up to the bid, and we're going to be open for more people to join the network once it gets established. So, and that's a combination of academic institutions, research institutions, industry, governmental bodies, and others. So it's a really good mixture, and I think we need that mixture across the research landscape. That kind of crossing sectors is very, very important in terms of, organisation type, but also we need to cross sectors in terms of topic areas. There's been a lot of work in the engineering domain, and I think now moving to more human, psychological, social is a really important aspect.
Thanks, David. Do others have questions for David on that topic, or would you like to expand on what he's said? Miranda.
I hesitate to believe there's been insufficient academic research. Let me just put it out there. I wonder, have we done enough connecting the technical exploration to solving real people's problems and delivering real benefit and value for people? Now, I am sure, and I am absolutely confident there is work to be done in connecting academic and reality. I would question the insufficient academic, but now I'm going to speak against myself, because Sarah Sharples, of whom I am an enormous fan, who's the Chief Scientific Advisor at DFT, says the greatest problem in designing technology is how to incorporate humans into it, because they are both the most brilliant and the most flawed component of any system.
Okay, good. So we did have a challenge there. I don't know, David, if you wanted to respond to that, or if anybody else wants to add to it.
I'm happy to come in, if that's okay. I think There's clearly no shortage of research, right, in relation to digital twins, and there's clearly also a gap between applying that to, I'm not sure, I hesitate to say applying that to reality for fear of offending all the academics in the room. It is applied to reality, but it's exploring reality, it's exploring what might be possible. And one of the challenges with digital twins, not just in academia, but in industry as well, is showing the direct financial value of investing in digital twins in order to derive value for your shareholders and your wider organisation. An awful lot of the use cases even now focus on non-financial metrics, and I think that is a major challenge in adoption and commercialisation.
Great. Well, there's clearly a lot of work to do, and let's hope Network Plus is able to drive this forward and to deliver some of that value. But for me, I think it's one of the exciting, and I earlier said that I was going to try not using the word exciting. So Henry, every time I do, and I say that because I think it is an overused word. There's a lot of stuff that's going on here, and the potential is huge. But at the same time, let's just recognise exactly where we are. A lot of work to be done here, and I think from the perspective of those researchers, if they are able to connect directly with the problem owners, then in fact it's much more purposeful for them as well. So there's win-win-win if we can get that right. Keith, with your experience advising on national strategies and emerging technologies, how are we going to construct the new value chains that integrate the innovators, the SMEs, the entrepreneurs into the work that the larger players are doing to be able to address the challenges ahead and to align with the opportunities?
I think there's two ways I'd answer that question. There's both value chains and there's values chains. So in the sense of the first, my friend and colleague Jason Shepherd, who I work with in government on national strategy and now runs our digital twin program office, reminds me often that people don't buy digital twins, they buy solutions to problems. I'm smiling because he says it so often it's become like a mantra. And what that highlights, and actually I thought what Simon's talk highlighted very well, was when you look across all of the different catapults that are involved in digital twins, there's no one solution that we're talking about here. It's a helpful category, a helpful frame. But what that means is there's a vast number of organisations in vast numbers of sectors, and nearly all of your solutions are going to be deeply interdisciplinary. So I think one way of thinking about this is that there is probably no one organisation in this room that will be able to deliver your digital twin solution end to end with all the elements from the visualisation and maximally providing the information in a way that gives you the key decision advantage that you need, all the way down to the sensors and the understanding of the physical world and the social systems within which these things are embedded. So the value chain for me, one of the ways you do that is through connections like this. One of the ways you do that is through things like the catapults, helping to pull things across the valley of death. Encouraging people to adopt technologies by offsetting some of that risk. And a lot of it will be through international collaboration as well. It's not just the UK doing this. The US has a major program, 800 square kilometres, I think, of miles, I guess it will be, of digital twins in Orlando. The K-twin in Korea. Japan has a concept of Society 5.0 where everyone and everything is a digital twin. And then lastly, it comes back to some of the things we mentioned earlier, we also need to think about values chains. This is not the first time that people have tried to build connected digital twins of everything and everyone. So if you think of CyberSyn, which was a project in Alonge, Chile, that was an attempt with a mainframe computer to connect to sensors in every factory, try to model the economy, and try to predict what would be necessary to maximise the effect. It was also actually about delegating authority down to kind of factory and worker level. It wasn't mainly a centralisation attempt, it was a socialist effort. But what that highlights is that digital twins of everything and everyone are not neutral, and they're going to have values built into the tech. So a national strategy and a commercial strategy for all of us shouldn't imagine that it is values neutral. I think it's really interesting that a lot of the use cases we pick are the ones that signal the kind of virtues we wish to signal. One of the big use cases earlier was on how we use digital twins to address climate change. I think that's important, but let's not lose sight of the fact that even when you do that, you're building values into the technology. So it is about value chains with huge opportunity, and it's about values chains with huge opportunities and risks.
Thanks, Keith. I'll come back to a couple of points that you made there, but before I do we have any questions for Keith either here or we've got Slido up now in the background here. So please do, if you've got questions you want to ask, make sure that you just log into Slido, ask your question. Henry's going to be watching it. Henry, if you see a good one that you want to jump in and add, then please do that as well through We don't have to save it till the end. Does anybody want to build on the ideas of value chains and values chains that Keith has put across there? I think Miranda, maybe.
I don't want to be the one that does.
No, well, you go on, challenge.
It's just so important, actually. And I apologise to David for being rude to him at the start now. But and I want to challenge you on something you said about non-financial value. We're not very good at valuing resilience and response to something like a system shock. So we can spend a lot of time arguing we can spend a lot of time saying it's a bit disappointing that we can't put financial value on the thing that we're delivering, or we can deliver it and find the value later. And so I agree with you. It's disappointing. I think we need to put an effort into working out ways of valuing it, so that we can make the case better. And I think that's an absolute key area of research.
Can I say that sort of vehement agreement? Really, I think you, even with what I think the point is to think beyond the non-financial metrics. Resilience is a good use case because actually, usually with resilience, you can eventually put a financial value and say, if you didn't do this, this was the cost, the risk, and so forth. There are probably some examples you might find that harder in biodiversity, but I think even then, not impossible, in my view.
Yeah.
Kjell, I think.
I think it's also worth reflecting on how to build these value chains so that they last over time. We've seen multiple digital twins which were created by people with a passion, but they weren't really integrated into the operations. They weren't maintained. And then when that team is moved to another project or another asset, that digital twin tend to die. So also getting that aspect into how we build value, sustainable value over time, I think is an important aspect.
Kjell, I strongly agree. I think one of the things Jason is leading on for us is thinking about what is the business model for the spatial internet, which is as profound a question as you're likely to get asked today, I think. But if we're building digital twins of everything and everyone, you are looking at, and I say this often, as profound a revolution for how we interact with information as the introduction of the internet. And that will need a whole new business model, which does not yet exist. And I've been talking to people in the room about that, so I know lots of other people interested too. And then on the values side, we have a social digital twin led by Kurt, who I see in the audience, doing some interesting work on the Isle of Wight. And that, again, is thinking from the start about the psychological models, the psychometric models, but also privacy, agency, security. How do we protect all of those things? I think, again, not sort of a point of disagreement, but rather vehement agreement. You might have to work harder to spark disagreement between us, I think. Justin?
Well, we've got a question from the audience. Do you want to try one, Henry? Yeah.
We do indeed. So there is a question about the launch of the Network Plus. When is that happening?
So we have to start it on the 1st of August this year. That was defined in the call. But we're hoping to when that will be the sort of admin launch, if you like, and getting things organised. We're hoping to launch things properly either late this year or in January 24. We'll come up with some specific dates and let people know.
And aligned to that is the question that there is not enough connection between academics in digital twin research, and they're not being invited to get involved. So what could we do about that?
I think that's right. There isn't a community. I mean, most academic communities have international associations, national associations. They have journals that publish. There isn't anything like that in the academic community for digital twins. So it's all being done across a patchwork of domain-specific and subject-specific areas. So there is a lack of cohesion in the academic community in that sense. So, I mean, if the Network Plus can try and start to address some of that, that would be great. And as I said earlier, we'll have an open joining process once we get a website established. People are welcome to join. People are welcome to come along. It's not a closed network. It's open to anybody who's interested.
Thank you. Miranda, with your role at the ODI, where you're connecting digital data people to opportunities, how do you see the challenge that we face with regards to closing the skills gap in the market and avoiding some of the confusion that we see as people are describing different things in different ways and ultimately potentially confusing the buyers because they just don't know which way to turn?
Well, I mean, I think we're seeing that it's a nascent space. There's not enough collaboration. There's too much collaboration. There's not enough research. We're all learning. And what we could all probably do with is a healthy dose of humility, really, and humility extended to, we haven't found the one ring to rule them all yet. There isn't going to be one big winner in this. At least I hope there isn't one big winner in this space, so we're all learning together. I think that's an important thing, and. There is probably never sufficient data literacy, skills in sharing all things. It's always easier to share other people's toys. It's something anybody who's ever looked after a toddler knows. So in particular, data sharing, the new commercial models around data sharing, that's a big area of skill that I think we need to develop. And also data ethics, because this is an area that the regulation is always going to lag the practice. And unless you're ahead of the regulation, unless you're thinking really hard as an entity about what you're doing in data ethics, you're probably going to get caught out and you're probably doing something wrong. And finally, I was talking earlier with someone about the challenge of adoption. We're doing fantastic research, and we're collecting some interesting use cases. But if all we do is collect a whole range of isolated digital twins which are unconnectable and uninteroperable, we have failed in both the technology and in the social work, and as in the socio-technical work in making things adoptable and usable by multiple sets of people. There are really good reasons why I call something a bridge and you call it a tunnel. That doesn't mean that our data isn't interoperable. It just means it needs some work and some thought into it. That's the kind of work, working at the sort of the interfaces of this activity is where we're going to need to develop some skills.
Kjell.
Yeah, maybe a reflection on the skill shortage. And maybe one thing that will work in our favor is that I think the role of a data scientist will change going forward. There will be tools helping, low-code environment, AI that can help to do some of the coding for you. So I think traditionally data scientists, which is in shortage, have been spending a lot of time cleansing data, which is something that the machine can do for you. So there are maybe things to working in our favor and helping to that skills gap.
Keith.
I'm going to try really hard to provoke some disagreement. I might fail again, but I shall try, Miranda. So I think that the idea that the regulation necessarily has to lag the practice, I don't think is necessarily true. I do think it's probably the right approach. I think you could I think the EU, for example, with its AI regulations, and of course digital twins are where all these technologies instantiate in the end. I think they have taken a much more proactive choice, and I think there was one estimate I saw that it will cost them the equivalent of the GDP of Italy every 5 years if they go ahead with it. The decision to have your regulations lag is, I think, a deliberate decision. I think it's probably the right decision. You just want to minimise the gap between error and correction. You're nodding, which means I failed to provoke, but I did try.
No, I think you're right. I don't think it's a bad thing that regulation lags practice. But you need to be cognizant that if you're relying on the regulation, you're behind.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So, unfortunately,
I've got a question here that's bubbling up on Slido, which I'm going to combine with one that I wanted to pose to Kjell anyway. Kjell, you have responsibility for overseeing digital partnerships at DMV. And I know that you have done a lot of work in and around trust and identity and security in the digital twin sector. The question that's come in from the audience here is, given the scale of national data sharing, how can we best protect both citizens and businesses, and how do we manage consent and liability? So there's quite a lot there, but how are we going to make sure that everybody is safe and businesses are safe?
Okay, I'll try to start to answer, and then the panel will sort of chip in and help me out, I think. We tend to say that data is the new gold, and maybe going forward, transparency is the new gold. So the organizations that show how data is managed, our information is managed, what's done with it, will be the organizations that we tend to trust as citizens, as investors. So I think in the sort of era going forward, I think there will be an increased demand for sharing what is going on. I think there are frameworks that can help us. Keith mentioned the EU AI Act. It will come into force later this year, after summer. And I know Brexit happened, but for those who are exporting to Europe, if the regulations apply both to the user of artificial intelligence and the supplier. So if you are based in the UK and exporting your solutions to Europe, you will have to comply. And the fines that the EU is threatening with is significant. So it's, and I think that's a good framework. There is another framework in the US, the Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework by NIST, which can also give some guidance on how to create transparent systems. And in DNV we also published a set of recommended practices on anything from how to quality assure a digital twin to data quality and algorithms and so on. So there are frameworks out there. I think what is in common for all of them and where they are good is they are risk-based, so that you apply the right measure for the right solution depending on how critical it is. So there are ways, I think, to increase transparency, increase trust, increase how data is being used. And I recommend to follow those.
Thanks, Kjell. Keith, are you going to challenge that or add?
Well, yeah, but not for the sake of it. I think genuinely, I think so. I think if you start with the EU AI Act, and if it's always an area you can disagree on, it's usually something around Brexit and the EU, regardless of where your politics sits. So there was a paper out yesterday from the Centre for Security and Emerging Technology at Georgetown, which compared current foundation models, large language models, and said how many of them would be compliant with the EU AI Act. And the summary, crudely put, is none. Can you imagine the damage that will do? There's no estimates yet because no one's done the work to the EU economy. So yes, if you're a business here in the UK, you have to think about that. But you also might think about where you want to place your innovation and which markets you want to focus on if you want to stay ahead in these technologies. I think so. I don't think it is far from a universal good. And the other thing is a bit more. I don't know what the right word is. Maybe cynical, but citizens and companies' interests don't always align, and there might be a demand for greater transparency, but I think investors, Milton Friedman might be, his ideas might be slightly overtaken, but nevertheless they're driven by shareholder value and returns, and I think transparency will always take a back seat to that, and so the only way that happens is through Miranda's regulation. I mean, I don't see the demand for transparency alone being sufficient to force corporations to be transparent. So a bit more cynical and scepticism, but
right. Okay. Now I might be able to disagree with you.
great.
So I spent a large part of my career arguing with the Open Data Institute. So it's quite interesting I'm now there, because can I use my spanners example, right? So a million years ago, when my dad bought a 2CV, he had a garage full of spanners because the most efficient way of keeping the car on the road was my dad to mess around with his spanners. My godchildren, those of them who drive, wouldn't dream of having a spanner in their garage because the efficient way we've moved beyond the horizon, and the spanners are now all in the dealership somewhere. And so it used to be, the Open Data Institute used to argue very strongly for transparency. And now we, I believe, have a slightly more mature attitude. We talk about sharing data. And so I think the definition of transparency has moved. And if you're not sharing your data, and if you regard it as gold and therefore maintain it in your organisation and in your organisation alone, it does nothing but attract cost. So people who are able to share effectively will create much more value than those who hoard and those who believe that who have not entered into the debate about what a fair exchange of value is when they're sharing data.
Can I come back? I mean, look, firstly, I hope you're right. So I hope that's true. But if we stick with the cars analogy or example, you remember that, I won't name them for fear of being sued, but two major car manufacturers who did provide data in digital twins of everything and everyone. What emissions is my car emitting? And the choice of data that they provided through that was not what they wanted people to hear, not what people needed to know. And you could say, well, yeah, they eventually leveraged fines, but I mean, there's every chance that would never have happened. So I think the demand for data alone isn't enough, and it's where analogies like oil and gold slightly break down, because some data is also a risk. Information is power. It's why government departments will never share all their data. There's no way that Minister X is going to share all the data in her department with Minister Y, because Minister Y will then use that to undermine Minister X in order to get ahead in the great game of politics. And for politics, just read Super Intense Version of Life Everywhere Else. So I think, I hope that's right, but I think that the priorities of shareholder value and individual incentives trump the desire to share.
David, you wanted to add?
Yeah, just like a slightly different point on this kind of overall topic of sort of sharing. I think the idea of democratization is quite important, and that tends to happen as a technology evolves anyway. And what I mean by that is people being able to get access to the technology themselves. And at the moment, we see with the big AI companies and probably also with big companies who are developing digital twin software particularly, they've got the resources and the capabilities to actually put solutions out there. And if you're a smaller company or even a medium-sized company, that may be too difficult or beyond your means, or at least for what you're actually trying to do. And over time, what I think happens is that there is a sort of process of democratization that starts to happen, and we've seen that with internet-based and web-based technologies, where it used to be the preserve of very few, and now essentially anybody can go online and create a web business and get started very quickly. But I don't know whether anyone else, if we've got time, whether anyone else has got a follow-up.
Well,
That would be interesting.
we're running out of time here, and we do have some good questions that are coming through on Slido. I want to ask one that David Smallbone has put forward. There's 1,000 people attending today. If we all work together, we can make the step change in awareness and capability you're talking about. What's the one thing you want us all to do to make sure we take away as an action? So let's just quickly go through. What is it you'd like people to do after they leave today? Who wants to start?
Sorry.
We'll go down the line here.
Go down the line. Well, I think buy into the concept, but also not just buy into it as it's presented to you. Think about the concept as said earlier. It's evolving. It's a very fast-moving space, but there's a lot of room for new ideas and new innovations. So, I'd say take what's out there, but also shape it to make it your own.
I think this might be two things in one, but absolutely evangelise for how profound and important this technology is, but do it cognizant that there's no such thing as a neutral technology. That technology has values as well as value built into it, and you need to be explicitly considering the downsides, even as you evangelise for how profound and important this is.
Think about what you need to do to make your data fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and that often means thinking about your metadata standards and how rigorously they are applied.
Okay, find partners, find people to collaborate with. I mean, this is not something that we will fix on our own. It needs a collaborative effort. So look for the ones around you who complements you.
I think we've got enough time for another very quick question across the board. How is the new branding of digital twin differ from the traditional work that's already happening across industry for the last 20 years? Why digital twins as a brand? What's the difference? Kjell, do you want to start?
Okay, I think what's happening is the rapid development in cloud computing, the way we handle data means that we can do so much more than we were able to do 20 years ago.
The argument for digital twins, which are isolated, is well made. The argument for connected digital twins is emergent and even more important.
I think on the one hand, because of rapid advances in technology, cloud compute, IoT, sensors, I think on the other hand, all concepts have two purposes. One is to maximize the performance of the technology, the other is to advance individual and organizational agendas. The term digital twins is both.
Well, a lot of good things have been said there. So, as I'm last, I'd say, to make sci-fi real. We've all seen those films of virtual humans and really cool stuff. And I think digital twins are us as a community trying to live out that aspiration. And we may fall short. It may not happen for hundreds of years, but we can at least aspire to that.
And of course, there is a new season of Black Mirror just to catch up on all those possibilities. I think I'm now out of time, so all that remains for me to do is to thank our great panel for that discussion. Thank you very much. Please.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everyone.